Okay, so hello again. I'm Cătălina Bănuleasa. I'm not gonna reintroduce myself. I've been working as a user experience designer, designing mostly digital experiences for over the, I don't know, 5 or 6 years already. I worked for 7 years in a bank. You probably know ING Bank. So I was the person responsible for home bank until 2016 when I quit to join Vodafone, and then after 3 months I went to FIFA because obvious reasons. FIFA is a game, and then you get to design for the world's football game that is FIFA. It has a really nice history, and of course I wanted to join this let's say, adventure of my life into learning football, into having a team to watch for the games. I chose Arsenal. Sometimes you don't choose for the good decisions, but you get to stick to them. So right now I'm watching how Arsenal gets beaten again and again. What else? Personally, so this is about me. I also have the luck, I would say, and maybe you would correct me that it's not about luck. It's about being consistent enough to follow my passion and to be really good at what I am doing. So I'm the only person in Romania who has a certification as a Google developer expert for UX, and also being the only design sprint master in Romania. That's professionally about me. This image shows perfectly my connection to football before joining EA. I barely knew how to explain how do you call that, a penalty? See? And then personally, I would describe myself as my Instagram profile describes myself. What few people know about myself until they literally get to see that is I can dance anytime, anywhere, anyhow. I don't discriminate on music types, although I don't listen to some kind of music regularly. However, that's my way of energizing myself. And today you probably saw that I'm going to talk about designing experiences for voice interactions, and I'm really, let's say, enthusiastic about where voice and assistants mainly are going to take designing for digital products, because nowadays we see a lot of interface designers who turned into UX designers, and most of the times people think that whenever you're a user experience designer, you're basically designing interfaces, and I would dare to say that you basically get to learn about the people's needs for a digital product, and mainly what's their frustration and what they expect from a digital interaction. So with interface-less experiences, such as voice, you're not going to have anymore an interface. So you're not going to have anymore to just put some nice colors, and you will have to focus, because those experiences will put you to focus mainly on the user and the context about the user. Okay, so before going into the real presentation, and I just realized it's a bit broken, I took the title of the presentation and wanted to see what I'm going to talk about. And I took it a bit backwards. I looked at what interaction means, and then voice interaction specifically, because that's what I'm going to talk about. So I said that voice interactions happen between who? Between humans and machines and technology, right? So I'm going to talk about some things about people first, because it's really important to get to understand who we're designing for, and it's going to be some psychological and some really down-to-earth considerations that you probably already know about. And then I'm going to talk about technology and voice, because that's the topic for today. Then artificial intelligence, because that's what's fueling the voice interactions. And then, of course, we're going to say why we need to talk about artificial intelligence and how to do that. And then I'm just going to slightly go through the design process to really give you some hints about what designing is. And then the design process, and at the end of my presentation, I'm going to give you a guideline on how to design for voice, what are the steps and things that you should consider, such as well, you will see. My request to you is to maybe just be open to whatever you will hear, although some of the things I'm sure you probably already know, but the way the presentation is built is just to give you information, to build one information on the other one, because we really need all these things to design better voice interactions. So first of all, some things about people and some things about us, because we're designing for humans and we're also humans, so we should start from that. First is people are storytellers, and this is a buzzword. I'm not a fan of buzzwords, and you probably heard a lot about just telling stories to people. Besides being a buzzword, is also very true because we're coming from years, thousands of years of living in tribes, so we didn't have technology, we didn't even invent writing, so we had to pay forward the knowledge that we gathered from experience, from someone who, I don't know, was smart enough or just stumbled upon a situation and then he realized he hit on something, right? So he had to pass that knowledge to the others because we want to be able to survive, right? We want to be able to give this learning to the ones in our tribe to just be better and to survive as a tribe, because you know, you can go faster alone, but you can go further together. So it's in our DNA to just form stories. And if you're not paying attention to that, and if you're not telling stories, and you're just giving bullets to people, not bullets from guns, but just, you know, putting information very transactionally, probably people are going to have a hard time remembering that thing. And there is also, I would recommend you to watch the Netflix series Brain, about brains, how the brain works. There is a really nice episode there talking about memory and how we remember things, and apparently, of course, not surprisingly, we remember better things as they are told in stories. So try to, of course, not tell long stories, but try to form some connections that are really easy to remember and then to pay forward and then to understand how you should interact with something. Then, people are social, and you, of course, they're going to say that, and why should I care about that? The reason this slide is here is because I would encourage you to, of course, technology should help people in doing the things for them, right? So it should add value to life. A lot of the technology we see nowadays alienates people, so it makes them be alone. Being together with other people is a social need, again, in our DNA, because again, it goes back thousands of years ago when, again, we used to live in tribes. So that makes us feel happier. Of course, if you look around, there's a lot of mindfulness and there's a lot of things happening around nowadays because technology alienated people and because depression is higher. So try to think of this and have this in the back of your mind when you're designing for something. Try to bring people together in the real life also, because in the online world, we create a lot of, not me, a lot of images about myself that are fake and that don't value myself as a person, and that in turn can make you feel sad, alone, and not worthy enough or something. So the slide here, I would say this is one of the most important slides in my presentation, because we have to consider that we need to be together, and that will create more happy society. Then, people are lazy. Of course we are lazy. The reason why the slide is here is because we want to design things for people that helps them skip some things. So machines are really good to do that, because machines can do the repetitive work humans don't want to do. And laziness is the factor for progress, and it's good that we're lazy. Just try to think what is the easiest or the expected experience for a user, and then try to do the extra work, because of course when you're trying to do the work for your clients, for your users, it means you have to just put more effort into that and more work, which means more money, and more time, which again means more money. But we have to do that because, again, if we want to sell our products, that's something people are looking at. Then human memory is complicated. I'm not going to go into many details about this, but I just want to tell you that memory degrades a lot, and with the information, the amount of information that we have these days, people are bombarded, or they have too much information. We have some alterations in the way we remember things. The moment I tell to myself that I'm gonna forget to close the door or to turn off the light, that's the moment when I know for sure it's gonna happen, because then my phone rings, there's a notification, there's my watch, luckily I don't have a smartwatch, there's an abundance of notifications and there's an abundance of things that make us or our brains react differently and protect ourselves. So we started to forget more things. And besides memory being very difficult, again, watch the Netflix series about memory, that's a really important one. Technology even made this even worse. Again, that's somehow related to also people being lazy, but they also make mistakes, so try to think of that, try to think of the use cases that you might, that a user might encounter and then correct the things. So for instance, the easiest thing is, if you see that my phone number doesn't start with a 0, and you know that all numbers in Romania start with a 0 before 7, don't tell me there's an error in that field. Try to correct that, and maybe tell me that you corrected that, because I will be so happy that you thought of that. And I will praise you for doing that, because you basically did something for me. You told me that there was an error, and you realized that it was an error, it was an obvious error, so you corrected that so that I can just have pay attention to the things that really matter to me, because a form is not important to me. People have limitations, and whenever we think about our products, we think about them as our users, about them having limitations. Again, it's us who have limitations and who have impairments. And the not nice word here is impairments, because we don't like to think of ourselves as being impaired. That's because it's something not nice to be called, that you're an impaired person. However, I dare to ask you how many times, or at least if anyone ever felt they had an impairment, any type of impairment. Raise hands. Okay, name one. If you raise your hand and you're in the front row, you have to answer. Memory? Yeah, okay. Over there? What kind of impairment? Motivation, okay, that's intrinsic. Okay, it's a good one, but I'm talking more about the physical or... Sorry? Trouble concentrating, okay. So, hearing impairments. I see a lot of people nowadays, and I do that so often. I wear headphones because I love, again, I already said that, I love music, so I love dancing. So I hear a lot of music, I listen to a lot of music. Whenever you're walking, and whenever you're just hearing some sounds, and you cannot hear what is happening around you, so you enter an elevator, you have a voice-activated elevator, and you have your phones, your headphones. And then the elevator is voice-activated. Guess what? You can move with the elevator only if you talk to it, right? How can you talk to that if you cannot hear? So there's moments when you cannot hear, and that is the moment when you become hearing impaired. Another one is not being able to see. And that's not, again, it's a temporary limitation. Maybe you're outside, you cannot see your phone because our phones are maybe smart enough, but not as smart enough as to increase the brightness whenever they realize the sun is glaring into your phone. And then you're not able to see when you're pressing confirm to sending your mom to just not the right amount of money. You're sending the whole salary for this month, right? And that's not something we want to happen. Maybe not for your mom at least. And then that's being visually impaired, temporary again. How many of you know what this is? Raise hand. What is? Colorblindness. Yes. You might not know, but some people get to see the world like this. And it's just one of the ways colorblind people see. Of course, this is a major colorblindness impairment. But some of the people see this, and whenever you're designing, you're probably designing digital experiences and digital products, you probably heard about accessibility. Mainly you're designing for these guys that don't get to distinguish from, that don't get to see the colors that we're seeing. So you're designing some buttons that for you have some colors, for them it's completely different, and it's, I would dare to say, a really beautiful way of seeing the world, but we have to be open to that. We have to be aware that there's more colorblind people among us that we are even aware. And that color blindness, this is a major degree again, but there's people who just have different shades of colors that maybe don't see on one color and then they get to see it a bit with another hue. So I would really ask you to be more careful about it, just pay more attention to this. Then we talked about this one, limited dexterity is. What's limited dexterity? When maybe you're biking and you cannot use your hands because you have to, or at least I encourage you to keep your hands where you have to be when they have to be on the bike, not on your phone. Then you're physically challenged, and physically challenged means that maybe you have your hand broken, or maybe you're wearing your gloves because you're skiing and you cannot use your phone because obviously you have a glove, so you cannot touch your screen. Then mentally challenged, and it was said also in the back, and this is not about being stupid. A lot of the times I hear that, well, if people don't know how to use our products, of course, none in this room said that, if people don't know how to use our product, maybe they should read a guide, and maybe it's their fault that they don't know how to use our product. Again, because I really love people and I really love solving people's problem, try to think that some people just weren't enough lucky to go to schools to learn how to read, to learn a different language, and of course we're designing for international products because we want to be the next unicorn who's going to be sold. But if you want your product to be successful, and if you want to first test your product, maybe you're just going to design in your native language, in the country that you're based in, because some of the people might not know English. Not because they're stupid, but maybe because they didn't have the luck to have maybe some parents with some money to send them to school, and that's not being stupid, that's just, not having that luck in life. And then there is illiterate, and also connected to what I said. Oh, by the way, being mentally challenged also includes having some beers in a night, or some more beers, and then not being able to think or to read. And then, please stop thinking of the average human. Whenever I used to work in corporations, so I don't do that anymore, but I work again with corporations as an agency, and whenever they want to close your argument is, well, we know that the average person does that and that and that. And I say, there is no average person. We have to look at, of course, personas. We have to look at different segments. I don't call them segments because in design we have other tools to create empathy, and that is persona. So the average human, guess what? There is no average human, because if you're going to design for the average human, you're just going to design an average product. That's not going to be successful. So that was about people. Now I'm just going to say a bit about technology and the future, and of course voice. But first of all, because we're talking about the future, I want to ask you who knows about this? Wow, really? There's no big fan of Scarlett Johansson here? Okay. This is the movie Her, and has her voice. It's a movie about a dystopian future, not so far future, I would say, in which people get to interact with a person, a female person in this case, because it's her. And because it's dystopian, it of course alienates people from having real relationships and real connections. And because I said it's about the future, I'm going to show you something else. Do we have sound for the computer? If I play a movie, I'm just going to try. Trial and error. No. Sorry. Can you hear in the back?
Yusuke's ex-girlfriend, the one he met at his part-time job, died 7 years ago. He's been with a new girl, Rico, for the last 2 years.
Okay, so this is another, let's say, Black Mirror series. It's on Showtime. This is a reality, actually. This is a game. It's called Love Plus. And if Her happened in 2013, the movie was released in 2013, Love Plus was released, guess when? Anyone throwing ears? 2008. That was a logical response, but no, it was in 2008. Love Plus was launched in Japan in 2008. So I would say the future is already in the past, but I'm optimistically enough that we still have time to do something. Love Plus is a game that simulates being in a relationship. You have 3 characters. One of them is the one that you just saw, it's Rinko. And it basically, what it does is it talks to you like you're in a relationship, and you saw that she has some really natural responses and some really natural interactions with the person, just because they probably put a lot of effort into trying to understand and to learn from your behavior, from the interactions that you have again and again with a digital product. And guess what? Apparently, of course, it's in Japan. We have to know that in Japan people work a lot because they are workaholics. Once I said instead of workaholics, I said alcoholics. It's not the case. They work a lot. The depression rate and the suicidal rates in Japan are quite high. So they don't have time to date. And of course, someone said, well, if these guys don't have time to date, let's just make an app that's going to increase their self-esteem. How? By simulating being in a relationship. And apparently, the app, or not the app, the game, was so successful that it created a situation in which ladies had to deal with Rinko, which, Rinko didn't need so many flowers, didn't need so many attention, or nice words and stuff like that. So the couples in Japan have a real threat right now, because it's easier to interact with something from which only you take some benefits and you don't have to give back. But again, society is based on family, and it grows from family and from being together. So it's a nice product. Digitally, it was very well designed. It was very well thought of. And I'm giving it as an example because you can do that, because it can be done. If you consider all the scenarios, all the context, everything, you can do this. But try to do this again to solve some products and to bring people together to make them happier. So the future is here, and if we already decided that the future is here, we know that we have to design better for voice. We already know this. We're designing for voice, so you're gonna say, hey, how hard can it be? Because that's what we've been doing for some thousands of years. Again, we've been talking, right? I don't want to go into those details when we're not able to communicate well what we want to say, when we have fights, just because we are not saying the things that we really want to say. Words sometimes are the worst enemy that we have, and especially since technology, we have chat, right? And we have a lot of fights over the screens, because again, it's a broken medium. So how hard can it be? Do you know this? How many of you know this? Okay.
Voice recognition technology and a lift in Scotland. You ever tried voice recognition technology? No, they don't do Scottish accents. 11.
Could you please repeat that?
11. 11. 11. 11.
Could you please repeat that?
11. Whose idea was this? You need to try an American accent. 11. 11. Seems Irish. Doesn't it? 11.
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
Try an English accent. 11. 11.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it because it goes like this for 2 minutes longer. But at the end, So it ends with, if you just want to open the doors, please say, open the doors, please. Right? So if you're not able to say the number, how can you say open the doors, please, if it doesn't support different accents? Why this is important? Why we have to pay attention to if we should build better voice interactions? Because apparently, although we maybe don't think it's important, there is an estimation of having this number, I don't even know how to pronounce it, of assistants up until 2023. So it's happening regardless of we care about this or not. And the things that happen and we don't care about is that the people care and that the market changes, and then if the market changes, the expectations of people also change. So you might want to be on top of the, how do you say, the wave when it happens. Because if you're not going to sell products and you're not going to sell money, and so you're not going to have maybe holidays in nice destinations. And also another thing is the ecosystem is growing. And when I was in Google, when I was at Google I/O this May, I felt a bit dumb because I always considered that, hey, foldables, is that a thing? Up until you go to Google I/O, and you know, the Google I/O is basically the Google's technology event, biggest event. It's a conference it's a festival for programmers. And then they had a track where they had a lot of talks around foldables. So when Google does that, it means that maybe there's a thing about foldables. So the ecosystem is growing. You're no longer talking about assistants for Alexa, for Google Assistant, for phones, for watches, for phones. You're designing for cars. Because guess what? Car manufacturers are designing systems, their own systems. Of course, you're going to say that's a dumb thing to say, as I do. As I say, because you want to have a unique system, not Mercedes, not Toyota's, not whatever, because the user doesn't have an app installed for Toyota and for Volkswagen. They have their phones with Android or with iOS. So again, there's a lot of debate around what is good to design for and what not, but voice interactions, the good thing about voice interactions is voice is the same regardless of the technology or the system that you're designing for. It's just the context is different. You're talking differently with a person when he's in his car, and you're talking differently when he's in his kitchen cooking with a kid, and he's not alone, and then he has some distraction, and guess what? The assistant also has some distraction, because whenever you're talking, multiple persons are talking with someone that is a machine, we have problems when we're humans, not to mention machines, because they cannot really distinguish between many things. So, that takes us to AI, and you're going to say, well, you're not going to say that because you know why AI, but I still want to ask this question, AI, why? And then the how of AI. And first of all, I want to take this out of the table because AI is so, I would say, such a buzzword these days, or maybe it stopped being, but you put AI on the table whenever you wanted to have a sales pitch, because that sold, and that brought a lot of money on the table from investors. Guess what? Investors got smarter, and they understand what AI is, and they no longer buy the idea that you have AI if you have a logical scheme, because guess what? That's not AI, right? That's just a logical scheme. AI is more than that. So first of all, not because it's the cool kid on the block. You shouldn't be selling AI if you're not doing that, and not to solve some problems, because again, that's what I want to stress and say, that we should use machines just to improve people's lives and to create something better for the world, mainly because, again, people are lazy and computers can do what people cannot do in a really fast time, and it's a huge amount of work that machines can do that. Could just leave more time for people to enjoy their families, their kids, their dance, their music. So, what is AI? You probably think of AI as this. Some of people think of AI as this. How many of you think of AI as this? No one. Cool. Or as this? Okay. Maybe. What about this? How many of you think of AI like this? Really? What is AI then? Okay, so most of course, of the programmers I've been talking to, recognize this as more AI, basically machine learning, because that's what you basically do with a machine learning system. You give them vision, you give them text, you give them a lot of things, because that's how you learn such a system. The official definition of AI, and you probably already know this, sorry for bothering with all these definitions, is a system capable of simulating human thought and human processes, basically intelligence. What I like to call AI, humanly speaking, because again I'm a designer and I try to understand people, so I can put things for them to understand, is basically something, an entity, that can help you do some things. And basically it's an assistant. How you can approach an AI, a machine learning system, is basically, if you look at a kid and you want to teach a kid how to learn about life, about how to walk, about how to eat, and then to become an adult, this is how you should think of AI also. And if you're careful about telling the kid that, hey, if you're gonna just bump into that wall, you're gonna hit your head and it's gonna hurt, or if you're gonna just say some bad things towards someone or use some swearing words, you're gonna hurt that person's feelings. And if you care about your kid being nice enough, maybe you should also care about your assistant being nice enough and careful about people's feelings, because again, we're humans, and whenever we hear something that's not necessarily nice or politically correct, we get frustrated. So please try to think about your AI and machine learning system as your kid, and be responsible about what information you give that to your kid, because you want your kid to be nice and to help some people. How AI learns, and again, it's technology, and of course you're going to say it's programmed. It learns, first of all, it learns continuously, just like a kid, it learns continuously. That's a truism, but it's obviously. And it's learned, it's taught, not programmed, because you all the time have to put data into this. Because again, people change, context change, humans learn from you, and then they augment their learning, and they know what you can do, and they have more expectations, so you have to be aware of what are the expectations, the increasing expectations over days, over weeks that your users have, because luckily we evolve, so our needs evolve, right? And of course it needs data. And the good thing about data is that we already have pre-trained models for different languages, for different needs, for different contexts. We have pre-trained models. And you can take those pre-trained models and use them, but of course you have to approach them for your context, and to have people who really understand what is the context of your users, and then to adapt those pre-trained models to what you need and what you have. Then, the human-AI interaction, and I'm just going to slightly go through this because I already mentioned it. It's basically, you have an intent. You as business people, as designers, as developers, as whatever, you have an intent. You saw that something is not working right, or that people have some needs that are not solved anymore, or by anyone. And then you have some data, you already know some data, you have the regulations all over the world, and in Romania, or in whatever country you are, and then you're designing something. What the machine learning does, whenever they are interacting with the user, is that, of course, they understand something, they understand what is happening, then, I mean, the user is interacting with the machine, right? And then they look at what they receive, they have an input, based on what you gave the machine, they reason, they choose a way to go, a path, and then they have the knowledge over there, between that category. And then they have an expression, they have a result that that the machine can give based on that. And of course, based on that, you have a reaction from the user. Was it good? Was it the good response that the machine gave or not? You get to know that only if you listen to the reaction of the user. And then, because we're humans, we get to learn from that. We either learn that the system is broken, or that the system needs some help from our side to just make it be better and to augment the machine. And then we also, because here we have the interaction and we have to learn, but also the user learns, and then you have an outcome that can be better and better and better from iteration to iteration. This is a symbiotic relationship, because each of the two actors here, the system, the AI, the assistant as I call it, how do I say, the majordome of the user, is learning from the user, but also the person, guess what, learns from what the machine can do, right? We saw that Rinko gets to tell me, hey, you're really cared about and I love you. No, really, I mean that, I love you, because the machine sees a face and we took that vision to the machine and she was able to realize that the face of the person wasn't necessarily a happy one. So he couldn't believe that, so the machine said, yes, I do love you. Okay. Design. Design is basically, probably you think of design as something nice, something beautifully, aesthetically beautiful. Design for me is a methodology, is a process, is something, a way to approach problems. It's basically a methodology to solve problems. In order to do that, I mean, you're solving problem to create some experiences. To do this, from my experiences, this is purely from my experience, but of course, a lot of designers say that you basically need three things, and these are somehow the pillars. Besides the process, besides the step of the process, you have three pillars. First of all, you have to be curious, and this is again a buzzword. You're gonna say, oh, we've been hearing that you have to ask a lot of questions, and did you come here to tell us that? Well, my take on this is that you really have to pay attention, to look around you, to be present, and to pick up things that don't work and try to understand why those don't work. In this way, you have to be curious, to really be aware, to look at the people and to want to learn more about the people. Besides all of your prejudices or already your preformed ideas that you might have around something. But besides being curious, you also have to ask questions. And the problem with questions and with asking people questions is that we're afraid people are going to bite us. We're afraid to go there to talk to people. Luckily, people don't bite. Well, maybe they used to bite some time ago, but people are nice enough to answer some of your questions if you just ask them. If you go there and tell them, you know what, I'm not the smartest person on this world to know what you're going through, but that's why I'm here, to understand what's happening with you and to make a product better, to solve you some problems. And then it's not enough to ask questions. Because you might ask questions and tick some boxes on a paper. I asked that and that and that, but in order to really understand what is happening, you need something which is really difficult to approach, as some say. It's empathy. And empathy, when we talk about empathy, is something like we have to feel what the other one is feeling, right? It's not. Luckily, again, we cannot feel what the other one is feeling, and we're lucky that we cannot feel pain as someone is feeling pain. But empathy is about understanding that that person is feeling bad, although we don't understand why he's not feeling good. Because sometimes we think that we know why that person is feeling sad. The reality is we think we know from our experience. Whenever you have empathy, you want to look at the reasons that person is feeling sad. And that's a completely different story. Because that's again connected to understanding, to wanting to understand, to look. And empathy, it's just a matter of practice. It doesn't come naturally for us, especially with technology and especially with the fast-paced life that we have nowadays. So please try to put some effort into developing this empathy. One of my key takeaways from whenever I do classes about UX and about design, it's 3 long months courses it was when someone at the end of the 3 months, all the time there was someone approaching me telling me, you know what, maybe I'm not gonna be a designer, the best designer, but the fact that at home my wife and I have a better relationship, just because, you know, I get to understand her better now, or to at least listen to her, it improved the quality of my life. So for me, that's a key takeaway, because I want people to have different perspectives of life. And why I'm giving you all these details, maybe unnecessary details, but it's about having different perspectives about the way we see the world. Usually the process of design, I mean, how we develop products nowadays, or how we used to, I don't know, luckily we don't do that anymore. You have some strategy, you know what you want to solve, then you have some discovery, which basically means we look into some data, we do some research, maybe we do 1 interview or 2 interviews, then we do some analysis maybe of the data that we have, we put things into boxes and we categorize them and we have patterns. Then you do some design, someone does some wireframes and then some screens, and then you develop them. And then you do some more development. And then, sometime after these development cycles, you do some testing, which is not about the functionality, but it's about the app. Does the app function? Does that button function? So it's mainly QA analysis and testing, right? And then finally, you have some more development. The way the design process works, because this is broken. I have to tell you, this is broken, because then you launch a product that hasn't been tested with the users, 6 months of 1 month or 1 year later, after you put all this development effort, you launch the product, and then people don't use it. Because guess what? They don't know how to use it, because guess why? You didn't test it with people. So how the design approaches this, you have the strategy, and keep in mind that the shape, the size of the shape is not as big as the time allocated to this has to be, but it's basically first step, you have the strategy, then you have to look the strategy, which means understanding what the problem is, then you go out there to talk to people, to observe people, because it's not enough to just ask people things, you have to also observe them, because a lot of people don't tell you what they need, or what it's the friction that they have. And then you have the analysis, you look at all the data, because you have analytics, you have interviews, you have observations, you have a lot of other data points. Then you do some design, and then you do prototyping. You design something and you prototype it, which doesn't require at all development, IT development efforts. You can just put some screens somewhere and link them, and it might look as similar as to your future app, and then you can get feedback. You can put that screen in front of your users and give them some tasks. And then when the user is not able to do something, don't judge them for not knowing. Think that maybe the screen is not well designed so that the person knows how to advance. And then you have testing, and then only after you improve the product, after the testing session, you have the development. And it's an iterative process, because after the testing phase, you can go back to design, or in some cases, you might go back and have the courage to go back to that. You might go back to research, because you realized you really didn't understand what's the problem of your users. So you have to go back to research, although it's painful. Although that means discarding the work you've done for maybe 2 or 3 months, but at least it wasn't 1 year worth of IT development and putting more money onto that. It's a human process. It's called human-centered design process, because it all the time has the person and the users in front, in the middle. And then right now I'm getting to the reason why you're here, is how do we design in this context, in this design mindset, having the person always in our minds, for voice. And let's say you have Roma Pasta, which is a restaurant here in Craiova that has really, really good food. It's a traditional restaurant, an Italian traditional restaurant that puts a lot of emphasis on food and on quality of the food. But they want to do something more for their users, because there's a new competitor in Craiova that does slightly the same quality as Roma Pasta in terms of cooking, in terms of the food, but then in order to compete, because we're no longer in the service economy, we're in the experience economy, they realized they have to give to their users some experience, some better experiences, so that they can continue to have, to be a really important restaurant in Craiova. So, how do we design for conversation? Basically, what I'm going to show you is this process. We're not at the strategy, we're not at the discovery, we know where we are, we want to design for voice, and we're trying to prototype for that. Before that, 3 principles for design for voice that I want to give to you is, first of all, for conversation to be successful and to be relevant, we as people expect the other person or the other entity to be as correct, as relevant, as informative as possible. So I expect that person to want to help me, or the machine to want to help me, to give me only the correct information. That's something people expect. Then it's turn-taking, which basically means I'm talking, you're listening. You're talking, I'm listening. That's an expectation about dialogue, conversation, although sometimes in real life we don't do that. But for machines to be able to understand what you're saying, they have to have this listening time and also talking time. So turn taking is the gearbox of human and also machine conversations, voice conversations. And again, I said this so many times, design for user contexts, because context change, and because, again, of the ecosystem that is growing, we have different use cases. And the person knows that he only has an assistant, regardless of the fact that he's in his car, or that he's at the shopping, at the grocery, doing the shopping list, buying the product, or that he got at home and started preparing the food. Okay, so what do? We first, when we want to design something, although you say this is marketing and this is bullshit, I don't have to care about this, some other guys will care about this, this is good to know that before starting designing for voice, you have to look at who you are. Because whenever I go dating with someone, or whenever I go meeting someone, new person, a business person or whatever, I have to learn about that person also, but I have to present myself in a way that best describes me. So I will wear black things because that's my trademark, and then maybe I will talk with some jokes because I'm humorous enough, and maybe because I'm really sure about some things, I'm just gonna pretend at the beginning that I don't know some things. So basically how this translates to designing for voice is you have to look at your brand, because if you're Roma Pasta and you've been Roma Pasta in Craiova for the last 10 years, you're not going to change that with your assistant. You're going to augment that and maybe put that into a digital product. That, of course, targets some digital people, digitalized people that have different expectations. So, for instance, here we have the brand identity. We have Roma Pasta that, I put this here in order for you to make it easier to understand and to have some examples, works with who is the target, of course, and then what are the brand values? Well, we are a traditional Italian restaurant. For us, the quality of the ingredients is really important. And then you have the tone of voice, because again, what did I say about myself? Maybe I'm humorous, and maybe I don't know, I speak in 5 languages, and that's my tone of voice. Sometimes I speak in English with a really beautiful Italian accent in English. And that once I nail this, I go to the tasks, because we want to solve some things, or what we want to create some experiences. So what could a user do when interacting with an assistant from a restaurant? Basically, it could mean I want some food, or I want some recipes, or I just want to know where are the restaurants and what's the location of that, and maybe some Italian tradition for your restaurant. 3 minutes. I already told you now it's going to be longer. Sorry for that. Task ideas, ordering products, cooking. So this is basically when you're doing an inventory, and I advise you to not do an inventory alone. Bring as many people at the table to just ideate on what are the tasks, because if it's just a person, it's going to be just a perspective of what could the task possibly be. And then from these tasks, you might think that, hey, we cannot do all of this, so we're just going to take some tasks from here and to develop for the first version. And then what do? You look, and you've basically looked at that so far because you've done some research, and here you do an inventory of all the things that you know. And maybe you decided already that your user is going to be, I don't know, the father with a kid that's cooking to just enjoy with the kids during the evening. And then what are the motivations? Because they want to bond, to create some connections. And then what are the anxieties? Maybe I'm afraid my kid is going to cut her finger because she's not able to use. So maybe me as a Roma Pasta, when I give a recipe for a parent with a kid to just do, maybe I'm going to put a video instead of voice. Because maybe the kid will look at the screen. Because we know we have devices with assistants that can also have screens. Okay, so we look at the anxieties because anxieties are really important. Those are the problems. And then we consider also the environment, because that's the context that I've been talking. Is it in a car? Is he deciding to cook with his kid at home when he's in the car or when he's at home? You have to think of that, and you can do that only if you ask people. So you have to do some interviews. Then you have some time constraints and some other assumptions. And after you do this, you have to give to your voice a brand persona. This is the brand persona that basically says, you could use, if you want and you're daring enough or you have the money, to just put Robin Williams, not Robin Williams because she's not between us anymore, but maybe Robbie Williams, right, as your voice for the assistant. Robin Williams was really funny. So maybe you decide to have a character, or Mickey Mouse, or whoever you want to put as your voice for the assistants, because we can do that, right? It's technology. And then you also say the story of your character, so that anyone that interacts or designs for this assistant knows that Mickey Mouse is funny, and when Mickey Mouse does a mistake, he knows how to approach that mistake, not like an adult, but as a cartoon character. And that helps you to design. Because whenever you know that you have a role to design for, it's not about you and not about you being afraid, but about designing for that character. So this is really important. Then what he might say, what's the personality and so forth. This is really important to have it. Although you might consider it silly, you have to go through these steps. And I would not say have to go, it's recommended and I encourage you to do that, because you might discover some other things while you write these things. And then what do? You start writing what the user might say and what the assistant might say. And when you have to write about what the user might say, you have to again do some research about that and to do some testing, because after you just put this as a script, you play it. And do you know how you prototype for voice? You basically call in some people and just do like a role-playing exercise. You have a person here that is the assistant, he has his script, and then you have the users that may have some context and may have some needs. The user doesn't have any script, just the assistant. And then the user will say something. The assistant will just read for the lines that you wrote. And whenever it will fail, but you know it failed before putting development efforts into that. And then you will know just right away how to correct that. There's another context. There's another way of saying that. Well, this will just get you started for the first version, but at least you have a tested version with some scenarios, and of course, because you have machine learning, it's going to be able to learn from your users. So you're going to do more of this, and in the end, you're going to get a better product just because you did that. Some key takeaways, but before the key takeaways, when designing for voice, please keep in mind that I expect, did you cut me? I expect you to learn my behavior. This is something people expect because they already know about machines, because we have Black Mirror, we have Showtime, we have a lot of things, so people are aware that machines can learn. Then, they expect you to be human. They don't because they know machines are smarter, and because we have Westworld, they expect machines to be human and to be similar as like humans, right? But they expect you to be smarter than them because you can do things, calculations faster than them. 1 minute and I'm closing. And then they also expect you not to make them feel dumb. Because if you make me feel dumb, it's gonna be bad. I'm not gonna use your product anymore and your assistant, because guess what? I don't want someone to make me feel dumb. And then, of course, unless you make me tell me that I'm dumb in a really funny way. That's gonna make me smile, and I'm gonna appreciate the way you just approach the difficult side of things. Key takeaways. First of all, of course technology is sexy. Of course we want to have technology. But life is sexier and people care more about their lives than about your sexy technology. So if it's not helping me, I'm not gonna use it, although it's really sexy and it's gonna make me look smart. But do you remember the Windows glasses? Of course you do, that was a failure, regardless of how fun and interesting they looked. Stop falling for your idea. Everybody falls in love with their ideas. My reality, I used to be like that. Whenever I started, because I was forced by my job to bring people at the table, and whenever I started becoming open, I realized ideas grow better when we have multiple people at the table, when you have a scientist, a psychologist, a designer, a marketeer, a brand person, a finance guy. Ideas grow better when we have multiple perspectives at the table, and then, this is a cool one, and I like to say that you are not the users, and you are not designing for yourselves. So many times I heard in interacting with developers, with product designers, with a lot of people, with the CEO. But hey, I'm also a user, so I know what I'm telling you, this is not working. And I always say, I'm not designing for you, I'm not designing for my boss, I'm not designing for me, I'm designing for the users that are different. So you'd better look at these guys and test with a multitude of users, because luckily, again, they are different. Thank you. I really hope we have 5 minutes for Q&A. No, we don't have. But I'm here for the break, so if you want to ask me things, I'm really approachable. And I'm going to share the presentation and the guideline with you.
We can do it like this. So we have, well, it was a 10-minute coffee break, but now it's 5 minutes.
I told you, sorry.
It's okay. This is why we put the coffee break after you. If anyone wants to ask her, you can remain here and ask Cătălina, and I will. The next will be Cătălin Meșter, designing springs, in about 5 minutes. So Cătălin, please prepare. And in the meantime, if anybody has questions for Cătălina.
Thank you very much.